Well, hello folks. First of all, happy St. Patrick's Day. On a day when all of our senior politicians are abroad on junkets trying to convince our friends all around the world to come and invest in Ireland, which they will no doubt say is a great little place to live and a great little place to do business in, we think it's appropriate to read a few sections of this letter which is being sent to Mr. Kenny, our Taoiseach, regarding recent events. Dear Mr. Kenny, I write to you today as the administrator of the Integrity Ireland website in context of the disquieting news that the highly secretive SDU, this is the Garda Síochána Special Detectives Unit, is conducting an undercover investigation into Integrity Ireland's affairs, apparently under instructions from the top. Now, in light of the complete and utter failure of the statutory authorities in Ireland to deal with hundreds of proven, legitimate complaints about serious crimes and the subsequent cover-ups by agents of the state, most especially by yourself, Mr. Kenny, by the Minister for Justice and by Garda management, this cynical and contrived misuse of Garda resources is not only highly suspicious from our point of view, but it is wholly incompatible with any mature understanding of the proper role of a national police agency who is supposedly operating under anti-terrorism legislation, and which is supposedly responsible for the investigation of threats to the state security and the monitoring of persons who pose a threat. Are we seriously supposed to believe that having the SDU investigate a volunteer organisation that is dedicated to justice, transparency and accountability is any fit and proper use of scarce Garda resources? As we said in our recent video update, we don't know whether to be fearful or flattered. Flattered because it seems that our legitimate and lawful tactics of confronting erring authority figures with their own rules and regulations is beginning to work. Or fearful because of disturbing reports of journalists' private communications being monitored, of the extraordinary number of questionable surveillance warrants being issued to the SDU, which is over 20,000 per annum, and this compares, folks, with no more than 8, I believe, between France and Germany combined in the same period. Of Irish citizens being followed, framed and falsely accused, and of the SDU's formidable record in jailing alleged suspects up to 12 and 14 years at a time, after special non-jury hearings, and I emphasise that, folks, non-jury hearings, just one judge is sitting on these. This is an impressive but unsettling quota, which remains the highest per capita in the European Union. In any event, Mr. Kenny, it does seem appropriate under the circumstances that we should err on the side of caution here. I am the only person who has placed material on the Integrity Ireland website. And as such, I feel absolutely confident in saying that nothing on that website could be interpreted, even by the most imaginative or devious of conspirators, as a threat to the institutions of the state. Not unless, that is, Mr. Kenny, you, your colleagues and subordinates in those very same institutions are arguing that the Special Detectives Unit are in fact being legitimately employed in preventing the exposure of rampant corruption, cronyism, abuses of power and position, collusion, conspiracies and criminal cover-ups in compromised state institutions. I then go on to explain how the Garda Commissioner is also completely failing in her duties, how her own subordinates don't even pay attention to her instructions to stop quashing penalty points for their cronies and colleagues, and how on earth, I ask Mr. Kenny, can we have confidence in the Ministry for Justice and the Garda Síochána in these circumstances? I then go on to say to Mr. Kenny directly, then there is your own quite remarkable performance in avoiding our questions, particularly on the subject of your personal relationship with the criminals and deviants who have been attacking my family for an extended period, and who, we can prove, have been directly facilitated in these activities by certain named Gardaí, senior civil servants and various other state affiliates and agents, including now by certain elements in the Irish courts, as we pointed out in our earlier videos. Indeed, that this whole sorry mess is such an appalling indictment of the routine levels of widespread corruption, cronyism and malfeasance ongoing under your watch, Mr. Kenny, that you simply cannot allow an organisation such as Integrity Ireland to gain traction with the general public, for fear of the great personal and political embarrassment to you, and for fear that the whole shabby, corrupt infrastructure, which supports and protects you and your venal cronies at the expense of decent Irish people, will come crashing down around you. Likewise, that you will do anything in your power to ensure that the High Court actions against the state which are being taken by various Integrity Ireland members, which threaten to expose yourself and other senior authority figures as serial malefactors of the worst order, will never be allowed to progress. And just in case there is any doubt whatsoever as to the truth of all of this, Mr. Kenny, let me invite you again, Mr. Kenny, now in public on this video, for the 19th time in succession that we have asked you, to simply meet with us, to examine the proofs and to answer our reasonable questions. Or perhaps better still, maybe you should assign some of your own personal SDU unit to come and interview us with a view to doing some real detective work, thereby showing the Irish public that you really don't have anything to hide here. The hypocrisy and the inconsistency is now complete, Mr. Kenny. Corrupt governors, such as yourself and your colleagues and cronies, first of all deceive and mislead us into voting for you. Then you plunder the Irish people under the guise of austerity, while posturing for the cameras with pained expressions as you condescend to explain how we, the people, must continue to sacrifice because, of course, you are worth every single penny of your obscene salary. Then, while ordinary families struggle to get by under the oppressive burden of unmanageable mortgages, stealth taxes, water charges, and the massive costs of an overblown and largely inept public service with all of its related quongos, semi-state bodies, special committees and state boards populated by your political cronies, you then add insult to injury by taking our hard-earned money and squandering it recklessly on media consultants, special advisors, indiscriminate self-serving political junkets and the usual jobs for the boys. And if any of us ordinary citizens dare to raise a fuss or object to being so royally disabused, well, it seems we can now expect to come under the ever-watchful and ominous attentions of the politically appointed SDU. But it's not all bad news today, because, believe it or not, we have a solution that will not only ensure the proper use of Garda resources, but will at the same time demonstrate to the electorate that you are in fact the man of principle, which you so often claim to be, by consulting with us in the overall interests of justice, before you set up any more farcical, costly and ineffective review panels, tribunals or statutory oversight bodies. Why? Because this will save the taxpayers a great deal of money, because we already have the facts documented and ready to go. We have the evidence to back it up, and we have a growing list of eyewitnesses, victims and survivors who are ready and willing to tell their story. That is, if the statutory authorities are now ready and willing to do their jobs properly. Alternatively, Mr. Kenny, perhaps you could reassign a few select members of the special detective units who you've already assigned to investigate us. Why don't you reassign them instead to work with us in rooting out the endemic criminal corruption which, our evidence suggests, infests every single avenue of power in this state? Any such assigned detectives, however, would of course need to sign off on our rules and guidelines before we could fully engage with them. Otherwise, in the unlikely event that they engaged in any improper activities, either on or off duty, the whole II membership might suffer the blame, and that, as we have already clearly demonstrated, would of course be completely and utterly unfair. So, as we approach the centenary of the Easter 1916 rising of the Irish people against a previous cruel, repressive and dictatorial regime, when, in your own words, Mr. Kenny, so many great men gave their lives to establish the Constitution and make Ireland a better place to live, the obvious question needs to be asked: what sort of a country are we now living in, where criminals, thieves, charlatans, fraudsters, conspirators and even murderers get the overt protection of the state, whilst ordinary law-abiding citizens get covertly targeted and intimidated for simply asking questions and for simply telling the truth? Citizens should have confidence that they will be treated fairly by those in power. The whole point of having a constitution is to ensure that the government is answerable to the people and not the other way round. That would be called a dictatorship, Mr. Kenny. And our laws, our police and our justice system are supposed to be there to prevent that from happening, are they not? So, what's it going to be, Mr. Kenny? A democracy or a dictatorship for 2016? Happy St. Patrick's Day.